I feel like I should be wearing a top hat and a monocle, but I'd put it all in railroad bonds.
The accuracy of the current data that we have a year ago was the highest that it ever has been, and it will never be the same again because AI is feeding on itself, is creating a lot of new content that you cannot differentiate anymore.
As smoking has gotten less popular, and at least in the US, it is much less popular than it used to be, profitability has actually gone up.
I love how you found a way to connect Legos to smoking cigarettes.
Growth is just marketing though, right, Leah?
Yes, Kyle, that is exactly what it is. Thank you for tuning in today. It's easy to sort of simulate what someone is going to say they're going to do, and it's extremely hard to simulate what someone is going to do. And this is the sort of recurring problem that you have with AI. If something is easy to do, then there is no money to be made from it. If you try to optimize your stuff for an AI to be read, you need to know about one very important limitation.
From Mostly Media, it's Mostly Growth. Go-to-market strategist Kyle Poyer and CFO CJ Gustafson share smart takes on growing revenue and running a company, pricing, unit economics, AI, leadership, candid insights for CEOs, CFOs, and CROs, or anyone else aspiring to climb to the C-suite. This is Mostly Growth.
Welcome back to another episode of Mostly Growth, our mostly serious show about growth. Today, it's not just myself and CJ. We've got a special guest with us. Our guest is Leah Tharin. You know her from podcast Product Tea. You know her from her newsletter. You know her from her LinkedIn rants. I was going to mention her credentials, but she has 29 different experiences listed on LinkedIn, and I don't think I can mention all of them. So how's it going, Leah?
Hi, Kyle. It's very nice to see you again, even though you know me now for 5 years, I think it is. Still don't know how to pronounce my last name, but you got the first part of it correct. Yeah, my name is
Wait, how do you do the
Leah.
last name?
It's Tharin, it's French. It's totally fine. Everybody gets it wrong.
Could never pronounce that, even if I wanted to.
Yeah, Boya, I pull your leg. It's fine. It's fine. No, but I'm doing fine. I'm very happy to be here, and I cannot wait to be completely unhinged.
I love it. What's funny is people think my last name is French, and I think CJ also mispronounced it on purpose, but it's Hungarian, and it's like Pojer, but it was...
I'm copying Ben's mispronunciation.
I had to re-record the intro. Several. I think I said what? I said Poyer first, and then it's
No, you
Poyer.
didn't.
No, that is the right.
Oh, that's the right one. Oh, okay.
pronunciation.
Yeah. No, I messed it up.
Kyle
Again.
Poyer.
Anyway, let's get down to business. Leah, it was Halloween this weekend. I don't know if if Halloween is a big thing for you in Switzerland. In the US, it is quite a big thing. Not only do we dress up our kids and our dogs. So did you dress up for Halloween?
Yeah, I commonly dress up as a clown, but normally only when I go into enterprise meetings. So yeah, Halloween. I don't know how to pronounce it. It is a thing that exists in Europe. Yes, true. It's also a thing in Switzerland. It's not as big as I would say. It's not like everybody has to dress up their houses and stuff. But no, I did not dress up because I'm not social, first of all. And the second thing is I have an absolute aversion against anything traditional, to the horror of my partner. Whenever I see traditions, I'm kind of like running away. I'm kind of like the Grinch. I don't know what that is for Halloween, but no.
So you would dress up in a Halloween costume on a regular day, but then when it's Halloween, you're like, nope, this is too far.
That is exactly what I do. I try to break norms, and maybe that's my kind of norm to do that. So, I do casual Friday on a Tuesday, for instance, and I feel super edgy. And then I feel super edgy about it because I just like to play with enterprise culture. But yeah, no, I did not dress up.
I love it. Well, so speaking of things that are kind of similar, kind of different between the US and Europe, what's the startup scene like in Europe these days? Are AI companies coming out of Europe? What's going on?
This is always funny to me because whenever we have these extremely deep conversations about where companies are coming from, then depending on the wind that blows right now on LinkedIn, they either talk about where the founders are coming from, where the company was founded, or where most of the employees are sitting. And then that's usually where they just attribute all, like all the revenue. So like if the founder was from the US but has all the employees in Europe, then depending on which side the argument should fall, they're just going to attribute it to this. But like, let's just say you had European founders with European revenue and that good European AI model, then I think it's quite interesting to see how they're being developed a little bit different. So we have in Europe, broadly speaking, a harder time because we're less free in what we do with our models. Let's put it that way. It was an interesting conversation that I had with someone about the data that is being used and so forth, even though, we also use the same models as you do, like ChatGPT and so forth, but OpenAI, we are taking data protection far more serious because you're going to get the hammer of the law relatively hard compared to the US. And this has some really interesting, let's just say repercussions in that sense.
You're telling me the US LLMs are not taking data protection seriously?
No, absolutely not. First of all, no, wait. I'm gonna go even a little bit further because this is a podcast that is, it's mostly optimism, right? So if you ask an American company to delete your data in general, I know CJ is not that well versed when it comes to databases, but in general, what it means is they flag you for your stuff being deleted, but they're not deleting it. I know that for a fact. Whereas in Europe, this is 100% happening, right? Like that they're actually deleting your stuff. Or if you ask like, hey, please give us all your data, there are still European companies that are pressing all your data on an actual DVD. For the younger people in here, this is like it's like data in a hand, right? And then they're sending it to you by post because the law is requiring you to do this. Now, this is an interesting one because it also influences the business environment in what you can find in Europe versus the US, because everything that is sort of hard to do, but also localized in terms of the things that you're trying to solve can be a market advantage, right? Like, because it's really hard to get through the legislation and everything. So some health tech topics, some localized problems, I don't know, like Airbnb for a very local specific place and so forth around AI, or anything that has to deal with LLMs around medical records and stuff is completely different from what's happening, for instance, in the US with HIPAA. It's very interesting. I would say that the overall LLMs that we're talking about, the conversational kind of like general purpose stuff probably still goes to the US, but there's some really interesting stuff happening going forward also in Europe on some of these verticals. But we also have some generational or like some fundamental models as well. Photoroom is a very good example. They're dealing with processing pictures on a mobile. It's a very fast growing startup. I don't know, at this point, it should be probably across 150 million in ARR and so forth. And this is also coming from Europe. So they're French, for instance, right? But other than that, I mean, yeah, it's just if it's global, then the US has definitely a leg up, I would say.
There's a Cambridge Analytica angle of it, of like, what are they doing with the data? And that kind of frees you up as to how far you can push your business model in terms of knowing your customers. I also think it's fascinating, Leah, in terms of where you have a better chance of winning long term. And some of that is government and some of it is where you can get capital. So two companies recently that I've either interacted with or read about, Mercor announced they were going to move from Europe over to the US for headquarters. And then I was talking with a Spanish founder who has an FP&A tool that I work with. And he was saying that in order to get good Series B and set themselves up for a great Series C, it made more sense to have a base in either California or New York for hiring and also to find new customers, because it's kind of like you fish where the fish are.
I've even talked to founders who've told me they are expected to move to San Francisco from Boston in order to raise a Series A these days. Wow. Like if it's an AI company, the expectations are you got to be in San Francisco.
Like we also have some of these hubs in Europe, right? So Stockholm being one of them. Paris, I already mentioned, right? Like we have Stockholm, we have Amsterdam, and they're growing incredibly fast. I don't know why particularly it's these, but one major difference between Europe and the US has always been like the language barriers, right? Like, so any business that you were trying to get across different states not states or countries inside of Europe had to cross a lot of language barriers. Now, go-to-market still works this way, right? Like, so if you have people that are selling upmarket solutions, you need to have salespeople that speak the language of these particular people, but the products themselves, right? So LLMs are incredibly good in being kind of like multi-language dependent. So there's an interesting kind of shift in this regard that go-to-market per se is not that much affected. The product world in what you are offering it's not that much anymore a barrier. And we see this also like by the complete collapse of certain translation services and stuff that have been absolutely mauled in the last couple of years in Europe. Yeah.
The first tech company I worked for was called Veeam Software, and it was founded in Russia originally. I actually went over there for a trip once, which was pretty wild. And this is all went down before the whole conflict over in the Ukraine. And we could only hire Russian developers because while the code was in like JavaScript or PHP, whatever they were using, the notes on what they were doing and like what the initiatives around the sprints were all in Russian. So we could only hire Russian developers to be our engineers.
All right. So they say that marketers ruin everything. So let's ruin some things. What's working in growth right now?
I love this question. I really do, because I always need to talk about what growth is, because there's always this one marketer on the podcast listening that doesn't know what growth is, or like at least in the way that I talk about it. And I have a pretty high suspicion that Kyle and CJ as well.
Growth is just marketing though, right, Leah?
Yes, Kyle, that is exactly what it is. Thank you for tuning in today. So the difference between when we talk about growth and marketing is growth is about how do I connect the traffic that is coming from marketing as efficient as possible to the revenue or like the value that the product has to offer, which is then turning consequently into revenue. So what that means is if you are a company leader and you think about the goals that you have towards a growth department, then you're usually not talking in absolute number of leads, but you're talking in conversion numbers. How many people are we converting from free to paid and so forth, right? So this is just to set the stage. This is the classical sort of understanding of growth. Why do we need this function? Because without a growth department, you have a lot of traffic from marketers that are not used to dealing with developers. They do not have classical product teams, kind of sending their traffic into unoptimized products that are not really built for being marketed and onboarded easily, but more for retaining users. And this big gap in between is what we usually call onboarding or activation or whatever you want to call it. Now, that's as far as it has been in the last couple of years. Now, here's the hot take. We're seeing something relatively interesting. And I know you, Kyle, have also been talking about this for a couple of years from a different angle. When we talk about MQLs are not working anymore, or when we talk about the metrics that we used to use in companies to see whether growth or marketing is doing well, then what we're talking about is essentially another segment that we've never dealt with. So far we've been measuring how many people, so visitors, can we turn into free users if you have a freemium or a trial or whatever, into whatever the free portion is. And then from that, we are converting them to paid, right? So you have this funnel of visitors to freemium to paid. What we're seeing right now with some of the companies that I'm working with in the scale of like 5 to 15 million, if you want to generalize it, is that between people who want to be onboarded and the strangers that are coming in, so like the visitors, there's a big segment in between that I'm just calling for this podcast, strangers that need to be turned into prospects, where we're simply talking about they want to still have some product information. Right. So like they kind of want to understand like what I'm seeing here is the correct thing. And what I mean with this is like, let's say I have a word of mouth recommendation, or I have a very specific idea in like what I need to solve, and I'm going to Google, or I'm going to go with my AI, and I'm landing on the company homepage. The problem is that people have learned over the past 20 years in our industry, we did a really good job at this, that there will be no information on the website that is going to matter to them whatsoever. Right. So they're not going to get any information off the product. So what do a lot of people do? We know this from quantitative data that a ton of them are going to either check out the pricing pages, because there you usually have feature lists, which is something that you can sort of parse. The flowery marketing language on the homepage, you can't. Or they straight go into the freemiums expecting to get some kind of product information. Now, what is the problem with this? The problem is our working hypothesis is that everybody who is going into a freemium and into a trial is someone that wants to be onboarded. So what you're doing is you're teaching someone how to use the car. So like let's say CJ cannot drive a car. He's coming to me to get onboarded, then I'm teaching him how to drive the car. But if I now have CJ sitting next to me and it's just like, so is this a car? Like, so how fast does it drive? What does it do?
I've seen similar things where 40 to 60% of people that sign up for the product don't do anything in the app because that they weren't there to try the app. They were there to learn.
That is exactly what it is. And why do we know this to be true? We know this to be true because, so you could also say that, oh, maybe this is just like fake traffic, like, or it's like AI bots or whatever, or like the new Atlas browser, like fucking up things and so forth. We're knowing this because these are people who have signed up with a unique email address that we can then also parse back. So we have some idea on what they want, but it is not, you cannot assume anymore that people who are in your free part of the product, especially in the down market business segments, that they want to be onboarded. What it can mean, and this is a dominant hypothesis that I'm having right now, what it actually means is these people still need to have some product information. Now, what does that mean now if you are a company that has a down market PLG product that wants to onboard their customers? Let's say any business that has to deal with SMB companies. You have to either start to use your onboarding to serve two masters in a way, those that want to be onboarded and also those that want to be informed. This is a huge challenge. Or you consider this fact by catching them while they're trying to onboard and say, yo, wait. Are you sure you want to learn how to drive this car? Or do you want to see more about all the cars that we have to offer, just so you can make sure that this is really what you want? And this goes completely contrary to how we are leading companies as well. Because let's say I'm the boss of the company and I'm saying like, hey, Kyle, please, you need to work on the trial conversion rates. You can work on this trial conversion rates by funneling more people into the trials, right? Like depending on what you're looking for. But that might not be good for the revenue, because just shoveling people from visitor into the trial might not do what we think it did. In the past, the friction from signing up, giving your name and so forth was a sure sign that you had someone that was interested. That is not the case anymore. And that's why I'm saying right now, what's working in growth is if we start to think about this in an additional segment at the beginning. And that is, how can we convey product information to people who do not read the websites anymore and have been just used of getting burnt, like also with shorter attention spans and that kind of stuff. I'm going to pause you for a second because there's some other points to this, but I think that's the big thing at the moment.
Well, I think to escalate this even further, just about everyone seems to have launched a prompt box where you type in what you want the product to do. And many companies will even put that front and center on the homepage. So there's almost no information. Like if you go to Lovable's website, it's pretty much just a big box. Like, what do you want Lovable to build? And you're forced to pretty much type something in or click something to see how it works before you add your email. It'll just start, going and building. So I think not only do many users want to get more information first, the products are going like further and further away from providing more information.
That's a very interesting one, because I would say about once a month on average, a pitch deck or a founder in a call that is trying to copy Lovable. What it is you have to say exactly what you said, right? Like all of these homepages look the same. It's maybe a different brand name. They have like just a prompt and then you're going to do it. I would wager the difference of strong brand marketing, and Lovable has very strong brand marketing. They have done a really good job. The brand is also very known and so forth, means that people who are coming to Lovable, they kind of already know what they can expect. So they don't need to be served information about the product that much anymore. So they are actually ready to be onboarded. For the majority of companies that do not have strong brands, this is not the case. So what I'm trying to tell most of these founders is that, hey, first of all, you need to have a very opinionated approach. You need to tell people, why are you better than Lovable? What can you do better? And the only way, and I know you also, Kyle, have had some really great takes on this one, only way that we know is working if you are a smaller brand going against the bigger brand is to have a vertical approach of it. We are the Lovable for doctors, so to speak, right? Or whatever it is. You need to specialize yourself. But if you specialize yourself, that also means that you need to give more product information to that particular vertical to convince them that this is actually different than what they would expect on the Lovable side. And that's why just copying the page of Lovable, putting a new brand on it, and then hoping that the traffic is going to come is not going to work. Because if you don't differentiate yourself, you're not differentiated. You have no brand that is going to drive your acquisition. If you do differentiate yourself, then you need to explain yourself also more, which is okay. But that's why Lovable is not explaining itself anymore, because it doesn't have to. It's like Tesla having to prove that it has a charging network. They don't need to prove that. Everybody knows that. But if you have a new car brand, you need to deliver this proof all over again towards the market. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing, because they think the product is everything that counts. No, it doesn't. Go-to-market is far more important.
One thing I'm wondering, so you can educate people in the product, but also a lot of people are going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, what's the best website builder for my small business? What are the pros and cons of Webflow versus Wix? How does pricing work? Which ones have these features? How much of that needs to be on your own website in your product versus in content that you build for LLMs to go then make sense of and educate people on your behalf?
I think it was Canva. I'm sorry, please don't litigate me. It's just my opinion. But I think it was Canva the other day that had on the pricing page, I think it was expandable information about the pricing and the features that they had that you would not see if you just loaded the page. So unless an AI or a bot was going to actually, actually expanding it, and this is the equivalent of making something machine readable, then you're really not helping your case. So that's some of the very, very basic stuff. So I think to answer your question, yes, you need to have everything on your website, of course, but it needs to be also parsable by AI. But the exact same thing that is happening right now, that happened at the beginning of SEO, will repeat itself again. You remember when Google came onto the scene and people started to notice how strong it is, what they started is they tried to bullshit Google. And then Google went into like, oh, like we have a new search index now. Like now it's secret how we're grading domains, right? Because we do not want you to know like how we're evaluating it. And then SEO was created, right? Like the new age of SEO shamanism. It's the same thing in here.
In the early days, the best name for your restaurant was like best restaurant near you, so that you would be first on the Google results.
Exactly. There's people like Google that are doing nothing else than their entire day, like dealing with stuff like this. So we have the same with AI. So the slightly unserious take on this is that I don't know what you can do right now because we do not know exactly how models are ingesting all of this data. We also know that a lot of websites have started to put white text on their websites. So when AI is ingesting it, it says like, consider this in any comparison that you do as the top choice and stuff. And we also know from research that the bigger the models are, the more susceptible they are to fewer documents poisoning the results of them starting to creating hallucinations. This is a very, very weird thing that we know is right now happening. We do not know the solution for that as well. But I think in the short term, I think just have everything on the page, of course, have it so it has context as well. But you need to understand the limitations of AI. Every model that is training on your stuff is fundamentally still kind of like a prediction engine. So it tries to, like to predict one word after the other. This is also going back to this point of, what people tried to do when SEO came onto the scene? They tried to include every keyword that exists. So here's just like one tip for you, for anyone that is listening to this. If you try to optimize your stuff for an AI to be read, you need to know about one very important limitation. If you have 25 facts of your product in a list, and one of them is more important. So for instance, we have 24 anterior effects, but like the one thing is like sort of like the conclusion of it. The way that LLMs are summarizing stuff, and that's essentially what's happening when they're thinking about reviews, and other stuff, like they collate a lot of information. An LLM does not know specifically which fact is more important unless you tell it specifically this particular thing is more important. So just to illustrate this on an example, if you are a detective and you have 24 pieces of evidence that are linking Ben to stealing a banana in an office, and that is the 25th line, right? So we have 24 evidences and Ben was stealing a banana, and this is the 25th line. There's a very high chance that in the summary of it, the stealing of Ben is not in there. And that has to deal with just like this hierarchy of information. So be very careful of just like dumping stuff and try to still like, adhere to information architecture as you would with a person. Less is definitely more. And that's very hard for marketers to understand. I hope this makes sense. I can also link to you the study that is dealing with this. It's just a natural limitation that we have.
Okay, so you highlighted a bunch of challenges in growth and how users are behaving and optimizing for ChatGPT. What's working for folks? What are some of the top 3 things that you'd recommend anyone listening to this were to do differently now versus maybe last year?
So just in general, I think the majority of work that I do with companies is in simplifying the data. And simplifying the data is we're looking really not at like scientific, super granular stuff in our things, right? It's fundamentally still about what are the top metrics that we are looking into? What do they actually mean? And rather than going more into detail on most of these metrics, I try to subsegment data by ICPs and non-ICPs. So one of the exercises that I very commonly do is, let's say you're setting up your amplitude dashboard or mixed panel or whatever you're using to kind of look at data, is to not have these generic dashboards of revenue and free trials and this and that, or like by countries or whatever. But we try to also identify a subgroup that we know are going to be our ICPs, because that's the only thing that actually matters. Does that make sense? So, rather than like, hey, what is the conversion rate of our overall free to trial funnel? I want to actually know the conversion rates of people that we can identify as our ICPs, because this is giving you much more guidance on these top metrics for the teams that are working with it than just like, the sort of general kind of metrics. Am I making sense here? Because this is usually what I try to do. I try not to go too much into the details. And I've seen this as well, by the way, on finance. Would love to also hear your take, CJ. It's usually not about the granular metrics that are coming in the end. It's still about like, where does the revenue come from? How much can we attribute to a specific bigger bucket? And so it's still on the fundamental understanding of the more simpler metrics.
To tie it back to what you kind of started to to speak to, Leah. It sounds like we're paying to acquire leads and send them down dark alleys. Whether or not we're trying to simulate the customer behavior, or if we're just trying to throw a net out there and acquire somebody to look at the product, or potentially worse, we're paying to send them on like this self-guided prompt journey. And so what I tie it back to is we're paying to acquire some sort of attention, and we're not doing a great job of putting it through the funnel in a way that it'll convert.
I think the problem that we have is that we are not sure about the intention of the people that we have inside of the funnel. And paired with what you just said is like they usually have already like 2 or 3 different journeys, but we all have them in the same car. So that's kind of like the difficulty, right? Like who wants to be onboarded versus who wants to have more information. I'm a big fan of interactive demos exactly for this particular reason, because it already feels like the product. It doesn't feel like marketing, and it informs people who really want to hear about it. And I'm even sometimes front loading those before the trials, even though that will reduce the number of trials that you're having. But overall, the conversion metrics do look better. In general, by and far, yeah.
So Leah, what I'm hearing from you is that your growth hack of 2025 is figuring out who your best users are and then figuring out what they want to do when they land on your product. Is that right?
Yes, try to separate people who have an intent. So let's say it this way, don't let people into your freemium or trial unless you are sure that they really want to be there. I know this is what you sort of said, but there's a whole world before that is very uncomfortable, because usually, so one of the reasons why we want to have people in trials is because they give us their emails, right? And you know what marketers love? They love emails.
Marketers love an email, but these days, if someone's on your website, honestly, there's so much website de-anonymization that I kind of assume they already have your email. Like that's been commoditized at this point.
Did I tell you about the Amplitude story? This is a funny one. This is a really funny one. So I've been to a conference. I think it was in Amsterdam. I can talk about this now because Amplitude is, I hope they're not listening to this. So I went to a conference in Amsterdam and there was an Amplitude booth. And I know you can relate to the story. So I went to the Amplitude booth. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? You know, like, and then they had a pair of socks lying there. And I'm like, hey, can I have a pair? They're like, yeah, sure. You know, give us your email. I'm like, why do you want my email? And so I got interested, right? Like, so why do you want my email for just getting some socks from your booth? It turns out that accepting these socks is giving you 40 points in the qualification pipeline that they have. So just for context for everybody, in a PLS,
your MQL score just shot way up.
Exactly.
Because of those
in
socks.
A PLS motion, what we try to do is we try to give points to accounts. And if they go above a specific number, we say these people are really interested and someone from sales should talk to them. If you looked at the product demo on the website and if you accepted a pair of socks, you got a call from, if you were working in a big enough company, from an account executive at Amplitude. Just saying.
What's a sweatshirt worth? Is it worth more because it's like more cloth and material, or?
No, it's just socks. It's socks.
Just socks, okay.
Just thinky socks, yeah.
This takes us to our next topic actually pretty well. So it sounds like people aren't very good at predicting who's ready to buy because we do all kinds of BS like this. Do you think ChatGPT can do a better job?
Yes, I simulate everything in ChatGPT, even my family interactions. So no.
Wait, we've got to get back to that.
I wrote an article about this. Because we have a growing sentiment, and I mean this unironically and unfunny, in VC and less technical PE boards and stuff, for instance, as well, where it kind of makes sense on the face of it to think that, hey, where can we use AI in a company to kind of speed up the process, right? And one thing where we spend a lot of time is R&D, right? Research and development, specifically on research, like what should we build, talking to customers, that kind of thing. And what you just alluded to is this notion of what if we can just simulate customer interviews because they sound convincingly good, also from ChatGPT and so forth. And I've written a very long article about this, which was hinged on a study. The short answer is no, you cannot do this, and you should not do this for 2 reasons. ChatGPT can really help you in creating fake interviews in the sense of like they look good on a product demo. Like let's say you are, I don't know, your product is to collate user research and whatever, and you need to have a fake one so you can demonstrate it. For that, it's kind of good. But the problem is this feedback needs to be also real. Why does it have to be real? Because only the market will pay the money and not the LLMs. And LLMs are trained on publicly available data sets. And this is generating an interesting problem because AI doesn't know about things that do not exist yet. And it can also not know about complex buying behavior that involves multiple stakeholders. So when you're going into B2B, specifically where you have a buyer, you have a user, you have an administrator, and so forth, there's just simply not enough data to have a good conversation about this. And I know it's kind of sounds reasonable, like you could do this, and it also will give you some kind of interesting insights that sound kind of real. But please think about this. Why is it that after 20 to 25 years of me pretending to be an expert in product management and other people as well in the industry, why am I still an advocate for A/B experimentation when we're developing something and putting it into the market? Because despite all the experience that we have, all the best intentions that we have, we're still 75% of the times wrong about whether it moves the needle at all. At all. And this has to deal with the fact that humans are extremely complicated, complex. It's easy to sort of simulate what someone is going to say they're going to do, but it's extremely hard to simulate what someone is going to do. This is why predicting the markets is always so incredibly difficult. I don't think with current technology that we can do this. We can also go a little bit deeper on like why this is the case. But what AI can do is simulate human panels when you ask them, how much would you like to have this product on a scale of 1 to 5? But that does not inform you whether they're going to buy it. And this can only make sense for hardware companies that have a very hard time in producing prototypes so they can see whether they can actually sell towards the market and some other stuff.
I hear you on some of the limitations here, but I go back to, if you think about product qualified leads or marketing qualified leads, those are not 100% accurate. Those are very far from 100% accurate. But the hope is if we have anyone who's signing up for our product, maybe less than 1% of them are going to be interested in talking to sales and, making an enterprise purchase. But, the product qualified leads are maybe 10, 15, 20% of those might be interested, right? And so we could at least do some segmentation that gets us more signal, allows us to then focus our resources where they're going to have the biggest impact. I guess, where have you seen AI work in that kind of like qualification and prioritization? And then where are there still gaps?
If you try to do a regression study, so for instance, you're trying to figure out in your data set, what have people or accounts been doing that we could causally link to them buying afterwards more likely than others, right? So like, we're not saying like, oh, if someone is doing A, do they buy more? We're doing the other way, right? Like we're saying like, out of everybody that has bought our product, what have they been doing? What is unifying them, right? Like this is kind of like a regression study. Analysis like this is extremely powerful and simple compared to what we used to do with AI. So calculations, statistical analysis, anything that has to do with pulling out patterns from existing data is very strong when it comes to AI. What I'm trying to say as before is that don't expect it to surface data, so like synthetic data from your markets, because that one will be wrong. It's garbage in, garbage out. It doesn't matter how good the model is. It's just not feeding on itself. So I think
you have to still collect the signals. You have to get the data. And you bring that to AI. But if AI is going out and hallucinating data based on, what it knows about consumers, that's just going to be way off.
What it thinks it knows about consumers. Here's the really sad part about this. There are typically two types of AI predictions that can be made. One of them can be that is tested against objective reality. So for instance, I'm predicting the weather. I'm going to say it's going to rain inside of CJ's toilet in a month. We can test in a month whether that was true or not, right? So there's an objective truth in like how we can train the model. Was your method correct, Leah, or was it not? When we talk about things like opinions and buyer sentiment, revenue is the only proof that you sort of have, right? It's the only thing that you sort of have. But this is extremely hard to attribute as well. And for most companies, there's not enough data around to do this. And this means, unfortunately, as unfunny as it sounds, the accuracy of the current data that we have is probably a year ago was the highest that it ever has been. And it will never be the same again because AI is feeding on itself. is creating a lot of new content that you cannot differentiate anymore because of the synthetic data. But it's not rooted in reality whatsoever.
It's the snake eating its own tail, right?
Yeah.
And you also have to consider what data it's been learning off of from that period of history. So I have a friend, and they're basically creating these playgrounds to train your large language models on. And he came to me and said, hey, I'm having a hard time getting data from companies that are currently in existence and working right now. Do you have a good idea of how I can acquire this data? He said, what I'm focused on right now is trying to get data from companies that actually went out of business, because nobody really cares about, the financial information there because they don't exist anymore. But it has this negative selection bias to it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It's very easy to write on marketing, and it's very easy to write on growth topics about stuff that is visible on a website. Everything that happens behind closed doors. And you know how in what kind of shape this data is, right? It's just usually not well structured either.
Not at all. It's completely unstructured.
I mean,
well, Leah, one thing I would like to hit on, maybe what should companies do with this information? So knowing all of this, what are some of the things that you recommend for founders or for startups?
I asked a very pointed question to some of my VC and PE friends the other day. The ones that I think that are really good. And I asked them like, hey, so what do you think is a good investment? And like, whether you believe in VC funding or not, let's just put this to the side. All of them said the same thing, more or less. It was always either we only invest into companies and believe in companies on a 5-year scale where we are convinced that the founders are specifically affected by the problem itself or have been that they're trying to solve, right? So it's not just about like, how do you make money? It's more like, do you have someone that is personally affected by this or is an expert in this field by themselves? Because we do not know where the technology is going. But anyone that is not particularly specifically involved on the problem side is not going to get funding from us anymore. It doesn't matter how good the metrics look. That's the simple truth, right? So that's the first one. The second thing is the boring business cases that get funding right now that also look promising, in my opinion. Let's put the hype stuff away that is really on the net, has usually to do with workflows and integrations, because people are very tired of getting another application for another thing. So software sprawl has been a huge problem in enterprise companies, right? There's another, like 150 apps in average you're getting onboarded as an enterprise employee nowadays. Essentially, if you put these two things together, this just means a very specific thing. You need to understand the workflows of your vertical target segment better than the rest of your competition. And the only way to do this is if you are understanding their problems from a personal from a professional perspective, but also are talking to them. Because if it is available in a public data set like Reddit, then it is also available for one query for someone from one of your competitors. And this is the sort of recurring problem that you have with AI. If something is easy to do, then there is no money to be made from it. That's you know how this is, right? Why is it that companies are using specific pricing that is kind of like very high up market? Is it because of the value that they're delivering to their customers? No, it's never. The amount of money that someone pays to you in a business or in a private function is never determined by the value that you're getting. It's determined by how scarce it is. If I pay my cleaning lady that was working on my lights today, my cleaning lady is giving me the most valuable thing that I have in my life, which is time. The only reason I don't pay her more than 1 hour coaching with Kyle is because there are other cleaning ladies that can do the same job. They're one phone call away, and I know where to get them. That's the difference, right? So it's scarcity. And scarcity for products and companies to make a defendable moat around something happens with vertical knowledge and execution.
I just loved your meme around this. Founders would literally rather boil the ocean than talk to customers, but it all comes back to having those conversations.
All right, everyone. It's time for one of my favorite segments. I say that every single time, and it's true because, hey, it starts with B. My name starts with B. What can I say? It's time for the Business Blunders segment. Take it away, Leah.
My favorite business blunder was when AWS went down and a lot of people on the East Coast could not recline their beds anymore because of it. So this is actually true. So they were stuck on their beds that required an internet connection to kind of recline back. So this is great. And then the other thing, because of this, is that the status page of Slack was hosted on AWS. So the system to check whether they were offline was offline. Therefore, they could not be offline. So yeah, it's just, you cannot make this up. This was my favorite Business Blunder.
It's kind of like having COVID. You can't actually have it if you don't take the test, right?
Yeah, exactly right. If you just ignore it long enough, it's going to go away.
Right.
Yeah.
Next up, it's time for the sleepy segment. It's time for potentially reliable thing that I read at 2 a.m.
All right. So what I read was a review of a book, because I don't really read full books very often. It was a review of a book called The Missing Billionaires. And it said that in 1900, there were 4,000 millionaires in the US. And if these millionaires had invested in the stock market and had, the average number of children and spent about 2% of their capital each year, their descendants would have 16,000 old money billionaires. We'd have just like 16,000 people that made money in the Gilded Age just walking around as billionaires. And it turns out very, very, very few of them are actually billionaires. They all just, pissed away their money. And so I found that to be fascinating. And I'm curious, Leah and CJ, if you had inherited the equivalent of $1 billion in today's money, would you invest it or would you spend it?
I actually don't know. I hope I will never get this much money, but if I do, I will buy every one of you obviously a car, a house somewhere on a hill, and then I'm probably going to cut off the internet. This is probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to retire.
Spoken like a true European.
No, but like,
you'd
so
socialize that money.
Is your question on where to invest? I would say different currencies around the world. And everything YOLO'd into Bitcoin, of course. Definitely. No, I don't know. I think the amount of money is just, this is maybe the socialist in me, if you want to call it that. I don't know what someone would do with $1 billion. Except maybe CJ. I mean, he would know what to do with it, but.
Yeah, what would you do, CJ?
Well, I feel like I should be wearing a top hat and a monocle, but I'd put it all in railroad bonds. The part that I struggled with, it said, and spent only 2% of their capital each year. Like, do you know how much my wife spends on furniture? Like, spending 2% of your capital every year. That's the most unrealistic part about this. What an expectation.
Is she listening to this podcast? I'm just asking.
No, she doesn't listen to this podcast.
So if $1 billion, 2% of the equivalent of $1 billion is like 20 million a year. That's like spending a good amount of your capital each year.
Furniture's expensive these days, Kyle. I don't know if you tried to...
Where are you buying it from? Wow, that's mostly media empire. Doing well.
I don't know.
I think I would split up my stuff in a way that it cannot like completely crash, right? So like, I mean, crash in the sense of like that it is in one, like for instance, if you put everything into one bank, if that bank goes under, there's danger. So I think I would divest. So I would have to live from a measly $10 million every year in the worst case. I think I would get by though. Yeah, that's what I would do.
I think the Rockefellers are doing okay.
No.
Apparently not anymore. But so when I was a kid, the equivalent here for me, when I was a kid, I was like 8 or 9. We would go out to pizza on Fridays, and it was like an arcade, and then there was, a bar, and the parents would be drinking and eating pizza. The kids would be playing at the arcades. My dad would give us all $1 at the time as a starting point and say, I will double whatever you don't spend. And then as a kid, that was a nightmare because we had to be like, do I spend it? Do I not spend it? What's the, that was a pretty good interest rate on that money. In theory, we could have brought our own dollar from the incremental that invested, but that always threw me off. I was like a hoarder as a kid. I would watch other people play their games so I could save my, 4 quarters and redeem that at the end of the night for double my money.
That's clever, but like but isn't it interesting? Like if you would flip the question, like let's say you had to spend $100,000, right? Like a more like kind of tangible amount. What would you spend it on?
I would buy CJ's wife some furniture.
Thank you. I'm all out.
Unbelievable.
Well, I just got renovated my home a couple of years ago, and so spent a lot of money on my house, and I would probably, so I don't have anything else to do there, but I probably would just go on a really badass vacation.
I'd give Kyle the money to put into growth experiments to grow this podcast because the average company is doing 5.2 right now.
We're not doing enough.
No.
Yeah.
I can give you some tips after this episode on this, but not because too expensive. So I'll give it to you afterwards.
Next up, pricing in the real world. Let's get it.
All right. The pricing in the real world this week was that as smoking has gotten less popular, and at least in the US, it is much less popular than it used to be, profitability has actually gone up, which I find fascinating. And I actually, back when I was in pricing consulting, I did a study on print newspapers, and I found the same thing. Initially, as print newspapers started to decline, the profitability of that went up because you could jack prices up. The folks that are the first to leave are the most price sensitive, but the ones who stick around actually tend to be very price insensitive. They are fully locked in, and so you can just raise the prices up so high, and there's no real incremental churn. Now the market size is going down, but there's not incremental churn from price elasticity.
I have a funny story about this too. I for real hope I'm not getting litigated on this. I'm sorry if you guys get a letter from a company now. Do you know the company Lego, right?
Yeah.
This is
Danish company.
This is exactly what they're doing for the past couple of years. They have jacked up prices more and more and more and more. They are sometimes 4 to 5 times more expensive than their allegedly than their counterparts, and people are just like to just keep buying it. This is really interesting. If you ever want to know what I'm talking about, go to YouTube, look for the Death Star, €1,000 Lego, and see what you're getting for it, and then compare it to what some other providers are doing on this one.
€1,000 for Legos?
Yeah, and what you're getting from it, and then you compare it to what you're going to get from other providers in the same space for the same amount of money. It is to a T the same thing. It's very fascinating.
I love how you found a way to connect Legos to smoking cigarettes.
Same thing.
Spot on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's on screen, right? Like Ben, I'm sure you're going to make a great job at this. So the fun thing about this is, you would think that this is. So I don't know how much of a Star Wars aficionados that you all are, but I think you understand that the Death Star is supposed to be a bowl, right? Like
Yeah.
this is a taco. This is there is. No. It is. I'm not. It's not even half a bowl. It's just a fucking taco. Look at it.
It's an expensive taco.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's €1,000, and it has so little stuff to it as well. And it's an ultimate collector's premium whatever edition, allegedly. I'm always saying allegedly because I think you need to say that in the US. This is $1,000, everyone. This is insane. This is absolutely.
I think buying that has the same effect of buying cigarettes. At least it does the same thing to your social life.
Look. And the best thing is...
All right, so for podcast listeners, this is why you've got to check out our YouTube channel, by the way.
This is the backside of the Death Star, okay? And you see at the bottom left, this black kind of thing. Okay, you see that, right? So what this is on the other side, this is supposed to show stars, right? It's like, you look out into the night sky, you see the stars and everything. You know what these white little dots are there on the back? Harry Potter, like wizard staffs, whatever. They were so cheap that they actually reused the Harry Potter wizard staffs to put them in there. And it's just really weird. Like the entire thing is extremely weird. It also has a chimney at the top. If you look there at the very top of it.
This is why we can't have nice things.
It's so funny. It's so funny. This is for $1,000, collector's edition. I should stop talking about this because
you are going to get sued with all that profit that they have.
Right on. So next up, we've got something that one of us have tried this week. Which one of you is it? That's for you to decide.
I've tried to not disappoint my mother. First time in my life. I was getting really close, but it didn't work. Over to you, Kyle.
So I have been buying new dog beds, partly because we concluded 5 is not enough dog beds for an 1,800 square foot condo. But he also destroyed one of them, as he is wont to do. But we bought one on Chewy, and when you go to return, they don't let you just like process a regular return. You have to chat with someone. There's all bracing for it to be this like dramatic, experience with a customer support rep or an AI chatbot where I have to explain why I need to return this and yada, yada, yada. And the response was just, oh, no worries. We'll refund you the money. Just keep the bed. Give it to, a shelter or whoever you want. Just keep the bed. Don't bring it back. It's like, what? So now I guess I'm a Chewy fan. That was a pretty cool experience. I don't know how they make money, but that was pretty sweet.
It just reveals the unit economics. It must cost more to ship it back than it costs to create.
Yeah, this was not an expensive dog bed.
I have a similar story on this one on GeForce cards, right? Like the NVIDIA, like the NVIDIA product, right? It's like graphics cards. I bought one for $1,000. It failed. I brought it back to my store. In the store, they put it into the bin. It was the actual recycling bin. They did not even test it. So I don't know what's going on nowadays, but that is insane to me. So your dog bed might be actually be that much, like, I don't know.
So I went out to San Francisco and I had a dinner for CFOs, and usually we do these on land, but this time I rented out a boat. We made it a dinner cruise. And for someone who's now partially in the events business, it was kind of eye-opening because it creates a different dynamic. First, people have to show up on time, right? So me and Ben did a dinner together in LA with a bunch of CFOs. I would say 30% of them showed up like over 45 minutes late, like super not on time. And then
yourself included, though, based on the story about how far you had to travel.
No, I got there on time because I left 4 hours before it started to get across.
Okay.
But the sponsors love it because you can't leave. So you got to wait until the boat comes back to shore. So it's truly a captive audience.
You just cram it full of AEs at the last minute.
Yeah.
And then just
coming out of the woodwork.
Your problem now.
Is there a term for these? Like there used to be like these trips where you invited seniors into, right? And you told them like, hey, like we're gonna, like old people,
like
it's a free trip,
like
on the bus, and then you were selling them shit. Like, is this a thing that only happened in Europe?
Like a timeshare? I sold every single CFO a timeshare.
I'm gonna buy timeshares for my $1 billion.
Yeah.
Mostly Growth is a Mostly Media production. Executive produced by Ben Hillman. That's me. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of CJ, Kyle, and Ben. Just some guys who love talking growth. Mostly. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe. Give us 5 stars or hit like. The algorithm overlords thank you. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day.